Hello and welcome back to the studio. Today, another Bob Ross classic. This time, Balmy Beach from season 31 of The Joy of Painting. Now, if you've seen any of the videos on my channel, you'll know that seascapes are one of those things that I really have a passion for, but it wasn't always like that. I could never seem to get this angle to look right. I used to have lots of problems getting horizon lines to sit properly, and well, palm trees, let's not go there. But I slowly improved. Now, what I've done in this little video is to try and bring together all the little tips and tricks and hacks that I've learned over the years so that you can paint better Bob Ross seascapes. I've got them throughout the entire video, so make sure you watch all of it from start to finish. There's the usual little slips and mishaps. Some of them were, well, technical errors by somebody who will remain nameless. But you'll see I've done lots of little fixes along the way. So, you know the routine. Sit back and relax. Notepad at the ready for all those hacks, tips and tricks to paint a Bob Ross seascape. I started by making a stencil that fits on a 16 by 20 canvas. I drew it out in pencil and then used a karate chop, hi-ya, to cut it out. But you can also use some scissors. Now, position it carefully on the canvas and then using a pencil I want to get just a faint outline to follow. Then just simply turn the template over and trace onto the other half of the canvas. Now for the next step, I like to use some masking tape. I don't want my canvas to bow in the centre, so I use a book to support it. I then use small strips of masking tape. I find 1/2 inch wide works best, and actually tape down the outline. I find this produces a much better finish on my paintings. Now, that hateful stuff, sticky back plastic. Okay, so I trace out a slightly bigger shape and then start trying to stick it down. But the stuff has a mind of its own. It sticks to itself and to me, but never goes in quite the right place. So, top tip, cut it into pieces. Now, the only place you've got to make sure it covers up is the edge of the masking tape. There, conquered it in the end. Just use your fingers to work it in. But there's always that one piece that's missing. Oh well. Let's put on the horizon line, and again a little strip of that 1/2 inch tape. The lower part is done in black gesso. Let it dry, then move the tape down and do the top section in light grey gesso. Well, that was a lot of prep for this canvas, wasn't it? But don't worry, if you're not really into doing shell shapes, you can just do this as a simple 2 halves of a painting. A grey top and a black base area. Maybe put just a white frame round it. You see what suits you, but I hope I can do it well enough now to justify all the time I spent putting this outline on. Let's get on with the painting. I left my canvas to dry completely. Time to add some oil. This time I'm using some Bob Ross liquid clear oil paint. I always say I keep it in the freezer to keep it fresh, and here's the proof. The liquid clear in this small airtight pot sort of turned to very sort of stiff gel, but it doesn't dry out. Here it is 10 minutes later, as you can see, the consistency of honey. Now, let's get an old Bob Ross 1-inch brush and apply a thin, even coat. I'm going to just do the top section, so hang on to the canvas and scrub it in well, but take care. Don't let that brush go under the edge of the tape. Pull it in from the edge. Now, it looks very nicely covered, but it's not until you sort of get some light across it you can see how much you've applied. You shouldn't leave a trail when you do this. This looks just about perfect. Now, here's my palette. I've got a few colours laid out and I'll list them below in the description, but the first colour I'm going to be using is some Indian yellow. The missing colours I'll add later on. Now, thanks to one of you lovely people, I have a lovely new brush to use. I'm going straight into some Indian yellow. Take a small amount on your brush, and I want to go more to the left of centre with this. You'll notice that the liquid clear doesn't change the colour too much. Being transparent, it doesn't make my colours very pastel, if at all. So a small amount of colour goes a very long way. Now, don't bother cleaning that brush. Go straight into some bright red and maybe add a touch of white to it. It'll make it slightly more opaque and a bit less glassy. I'll pull some Indian yellow into it as well. I'm looking for a nice peachy colour. There. I'm going to apply this directly above that Indian yellow colour and let these two colours sort of meet and shake hands. Just make sure you can't see any hard lines between them. But what's this? There's a few streaks getting in there. That's because I didn't tap my brush very well on the palette. So watch out for those streaks in your own paintings. I want to add a bit more red, and there's a good reason for that, because the next colour is going to be blue. And blue and yellow make green. I'm going to try using that brush again. White, a little bit of phthalo blue, but as you can see, even though there's red on my brush, it still goes quite green. I'll try overpowering it with a bit more phthalo blue. But as you can see, well, it still comes out sort of a teal colour. Time for another new brush. There. Now, phthalo blue. You can see instantly that that clean brush has a lovely effect on my colours. I will blend that colour in. I won't leave it there, but it won't matter too much. But this gives you a clue as to what happens when you touch this red. Don't be surprised if you get a little bit of a green hint coming through. Just one of those little top tips again. Now, make sure you do some nice zigzags here, because I want to be painting clouds next. And I'm going to take some alizarin crimson and a dot of phthalo blue. That's right, just a dot. Mix it up well and add another dot. I'm looking for a sort of lavender colour, but it won't look very lavender to your eye. It looks a bit too sort of crimson, doesn't it? Well, here's another top tip for you. I load a small amount on my fan brush and I want to paint some clouds against the blue colour. And the blue and the slightly crimson lavender colour, there you are, they mix on the canvas. Now, if my colour was already lavender on the palette, this colour would be going to the blue side, and it wouldn't be long before I had a green cloud. And just to prove what I'm saying is true, here's some of that lavender colour that I made, slightly to the crimson side, but painted directly onto red. The colour still stays a sort of a plum colour. It didn't change to lavender. I'm going to darken this cloud a little more, but it's looking a bit sort of choppy. I want to sort of soften it up, so I'll use the corner of a nice 1-inch brush to do it. Now let me slow this right down for you. You see, I'm using just the very corner of the brush, just a few bristles spinning against the canvas. Don't sit too long in one spot, because you might get green coming through. Move around the clouds quickly. Now, with almost no paint on my brush, I just want to scrub in a few of these little zigzag clouds, long stringy doers, as Bob would say. I'll soften those down with a few flicks of that 1-inch brush. Again, pay attention, no green clouds. I think I want to include some land here, and well, I made a bit of a boo-boo. My colour was just too strong. I reread the instructions and found that Bob had actually put white into it. But do take care, the more you fiddle with this to try and change the colour, well, the bigger it goes. And I've got, well, one of my little tweaks in mind. You know me, I like to add a little extra something. Right about there. That's it. A little dab of white on my finger. I'm going to just smoosh it into the canvas. I want this to be maybe a nice sunrise. I'll add a little drop more, and then, well, I got a bit lucky here. I made a couple little zigzag marks, and they look like little rays of light. Sometimes those happy accidents are all you need to get inspired. Once you're happy with your sky, don't forget to take off the masking tape. So my painting's going on rather well, and I'm pleased with my sky. Now, I know that blue colour there's a bit shocking, and it might be tempting to run and try and fix it, get that brush in there and start blending it out. But if experience has taught me anything, it's to live with my painting a little while. We still have a lot of the seascape to put in, and it well might balance the sky out a bit more. Sometimes we're tempted to fix things before we know they're really broken, and that's my top tip. Learn to live with your paintings a little while longer before making big changes. We still have to put on some lovely palm trees, and that's going to cover up a section of this sky. It might change the balance completely. Anyway, let's carry on and add the seascape to our painting. I start off my seascape by applying a small amount of liquid clear. Double check and make sure you've not put too much on. I'll leave a link to a video in the corner that tells you all about it. Now, I know I said live with things, but sometimes, well, I'm afraid that headland was just too dark, and I thought before I start the seascape, I better do some adjustments. And here's the reason why. I let my adjustments slip below the horizon line, but luckily I've got some phthalo green and phthalo blue on an old brush, and I've covered the bottom half with that colour. Now check the colour I've used. As you see, well, that's a little bit thin and oily, but that one, good and strong. That's what we're looking for, a nice strong colour. I've dry cleaned my brush and I've got into a little bit of Van Dyke brown. And yes, I know there's a bit of a hint of green about it, but I think it'll work quite well for this area of my painting. That's where I'm going to have a beach. A little bit of green won't hurt. So I was on a roll. This was probably one of the best seascapes I'd ever painted. I was so pleased with it. Nothing could go wrong. Except I'd forgotten to hit record. So I wiped it all off and started again. Just goes to show that you can cover up even the biggest mistakes with oil paint. So let's begin from the top. Titanium white and a little touch of yellow ochre. I want to make an off-white colour. And the first decision is to figure out where the crest of the wave is going to be. At a nice angle from that bright sunrise. I make a little curving stroke. That's going to be the crash of the wave. The angles from here on in are very important. The wave wants to be building from the right to the left. So I let the wave sort of diminish to the right a little bit. I let it sort of drape down. The waves behind it, well, they're coming in a little flatter, a little closer to straight, level with the horizon line. As you see, each subsequent layer of waves gets a little straighter and a little more level, but also a little tighter bunched together. As things head to the distance, perspective dictates that everything must be compressed. There you are. So my basic layout is done. Now, time for a bit of subtle blending here. Now, I of course got my big fat hand in the way again as usual. I'll change the angle in just a moment, but what I'm trying to do is blend the back of the wave and leave a little shadow line. Here's that better angle. As you can see, I'm just grabbing a little bit of that colour with an almost dry fan brush and just flicking the colour back and up into the shadow of the wave. Here's a nice close-up of it. Grab and flick and lift it up, but maintain the shadow. The light is very low in the horizon line, so you're not going to see all of the wave in highlight. Now, let's do this area. Pay special attention when you're painting your own waves not to get this overly bright. I'm going to be putting some nice foamy effects on my painting, and I don't want that background to be too bright. Top tip, before you do the eye of the wave, use a finger just to remove some surplus paint. You'll see why in a moment. I've got a Bob Ross filbert brush, some titanium white, and just off the edge of the screen, a little touch of cad yellow. Load your brush well and go right into the eye of the wave, and notice I'm just sort of really pressing it into the canvas, but I'm leaving a little dark outline. I call it my mascara line. It separates the top of the wave from the eye of the wave. It'll become important in a moment when you see me painting the rest of the wave. Now, work your way away from the bright illuminated top of the wave. Take care not to go back to the eye of the wave with that contaminated brush. You'll lose the luminosity if you do. I let my brush run out of paint and start to shape the wave. I think about how it's going to be water rising off the beach and crashing over. Speaking of crashing over, I've gone back to my fan brush with some very contaminated white paint. It's got lots of phthalo blue and green in it. And now I want to work on this area, which is the cascade or the crash. Let's have a nice close-up. Press your brush firmly against the canvas and really let the brush fall under gravity. I'll do that again. Overlap that previous stroke, press, and just let the brush fall. I want it to look like water cascading over and crashing onto a beach. You'll notice I've saved a lot of dark and shadow in here. Now, I've topped up my white with a little bit of cleaner white, but still not perfectly white. Here you see how I use that little mascara line to act as a bit of a separator from the eye of the wave. I let my foam just sit right above it. I make small circling strokes and I press with the back of the brush to deposit a small amount of clean white paint onto the canvas. But as I said, it's not pure white, it just looks very white against the shadowy background water. Notice here how I can flip my brush left or right and press and push and deposit paint onto my painting. I want it to look like foam splashing up from the beach. Press and push and let the brush splay apart and leave hundreds of little speckles of paint. This is one of my most favourite parts of the painting. The first time I saw Bob do this, again I was spellbound. He made it look so good and I just had to try. With practice, I got reasonably good at it. I've added some more splashes and crashes along the crest of my wave. Now, I've got a second fan brush, which I use for my clouds, and I've made a nice lavender colour with a touch of white in it. I add a small amount of lavender and blend it into the base of the foam. It mixes with the green-blue colour already on there and produces a lovely grey tone, the perfect shadow for my crashing wave. I want the same shadow to go around the inside of the eye of my wave. I'll also cover up a little bit more of that mascara line, but just leave a hint of it showing. There. Now, just because I did the foam first and then the shadow doesn't mean to say you have to do it in that order. Here you see I'm putting on the shadow first, then the foam. But I'll bring those two edges together with the corner of the fan brush. If you overdid it with adding highlights to your wave, don't worry. I can go back in with a filbert brush and punch in some more blue and phthalo green. Let's have another close look at the next step, which is to paint the surf on the beach. I've got a small roll of off-white paint. It's got some yellow in it and some blue and some purple. And notice how I press my knife hard against the canvas and zigzag. I go from the high side down to the low side. You can't go the other way, it won't work. And all I'm doing is squeezing paint out from the back of the knife blade. Now, I dry clean my fan brush. I just want to soften this effect. Let that wave disappear under the foam and then grab that little back edge. Leave the bright front edge alone, that's the wave coming up the beach. But grab that little scruffy back edge and just pull it back into the base of the waves, but keep it level and flat. If you go up, the wave will lose its perspective. Now, with my 1-inch brush, I've added a little touch of white and yellow, and I'm going to press and pull straight down to create a shimmer on the beach. A quick dry clean and then carefully across. Not too many times though, you'll just end up with a big smudge. Now, another part of my painting I really enjoy is adding some detail. I've used a Bob Ross liner brush, a touch of thinners and some of that blue colour that I used for the shadow on my wave. I want to use just the very tip of my brush just to indicate that there's some nice foamy patterns inside the wave. Now remember, these foamy patterns are on the surface and inside the water, but they have to follow the shape of the wave, steep here and flatter as we go to the right. Here's a neat trick for you. Sometimes it's fun just to lay your brush flat on the canvas and just wiggle it. Where the paint touches and the bristles are catching, it takes off a little touch of paint. It creates almost an impossibly hard to reproduce version of a foamy pattern. Just let the brush do it. It's almost like magic. If you enjoy my tutorials, don't forget, give this painting a little thumbs up. That's a like. If you want to go further, you can subscribe to my channel. It's all free. But if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring the little bell icon. This means every time I submit a new video, you get a little notification in your inbox. It really helps to support my little channel and help it grow. Thank you. As you see, I've started adding some highlights to the distant areas of my painting. In particular, the area between that little rising sun in the background and the eye of the wave. Think about this as a light trail. I want some lovely bright areas of seascape directly below that sunshine heading towards the eye of the wave. This trail of light guides your eye across the painting. A bit like having a guided tour, except you're not there to do it. So you have to use light to do it for you. I'll stand back and look at my painting several times and make small adjustments until I get it looking just right. On the horizon line, I just want to paint out that really sharp edge with just a few touches of that lovely creamy white paint. I think these highlights are the real crowning glory of my painting. And when you paint yours, you should take a lot of time and care to do it just right. Now for another seascape painting hack. I like to use cotton buds, as you know, and this time I'm going to use it to soften down some of those details. By just going back over some of the really sharper areas of my painting, I can soften things and I can make things sort of sit better into the painting. Take your time when you're doing this. A few touches is all it takes just to knock the edges off here and there. It makes a huge difference to your finished work. In Bob's original painting called Balmy Beach, he had the palm trees over on the left hand side, and well, I was sort of measuring things up a little bit here, and I think my trees would fit a bit better on the right. I start off by using the end of a brush just to scratch the line. If I don't like it, I can rub it out with my finger and start again. I think they're going to work quite well, so I've scratched on a second line. Now, I've loaded my fan brush with some brown and black, and oh gosh, that was a mistake, wasn't it? Let's have another go. This time, I've actually got enough brown and black on my brush to make it stick together. When you're using a fan brush to do tree trunks, make sure you bring your brush to a proper chiseled edge. Not that awful thing I did. So there you go, another top tip for you. I just want to drop in a sort of smooth curve and then go back with that same fan brush and this time into a little bit of yellow ochre and white. And just touch on that left side of the tree trunk and give it a a little flick for a highlight. Now to paint the palm fronds. No, not him. Fronds. I go into a little bit of black and some Indian yellow. It makes a sort of a dark shadowy green colour. And all I really want to do at this stage is just to mark the centre line for each of these palm tree leaves. Bob uses a fan brush to do this, and whilst it's a lovely technique, well, it can go wrong, and it's really a big feature if it does. Using a liner brush gives me a bit more control over my sort of tonsury. Yes, that's right, hairstyling for palm trees. And yes, this has nothing to do with the fronds. A little bit of time lapse. We'll soon have this big palm tree finished. I think I prefer them on the right. It just lets the left hand side of my painting sort of breathe a little bit more. It's not quite so crushed in. Now the finishing touches is some Indian yellow with a touch of white. I want to indicate some real lovely sun rays hitting this palm tree. Again, it's a small touch, but it really helps your painting come alive. Now, I've been living with that headland and I think it just looks a bit blank. So I'm going to just spend a few minutes with a small round brush just adding a little bit of shadow here and there. Maybe even a little bit of a beach line to it. I think that works quite well. I stood back and saw I needed one more feature. I need a little rock down here in the corner. With a filbert brush and a touch of Van Dyke brown and black, I just block in a small shadowy shape. Maybe a small one here, but make sure it tucks in under the edge of the wave and reaches the beach. Don't leave it floating. I've got a tiny bit of yellow ochre on my brush and I want to indicate just the smallest amount of highlight. Remember, it's behind the wave so it won't see full sunlight. And of course, I have to add a little extra detail. Maybe some water trickling down the rock from the previous wave. Take time when you do these little details. They really help to improve the quality of your work. I've got some very clean white paint on the end of my liner brush for the final touches of highlight. These are the brightest spots on my painting. I want to just add a few little bobbles and blips and touches and bits of spray and splash from the tops of my waves. And again, I use my little cotton bud just to soften them in here and there. Before I do the big unveiling, a special message to you, the watchers, subscribers and people that put tips in my little coffee pot. In fact, some of you are so generous you even buy me brushes. I send you a special thank you for all you do. Without your help, this little channel wouldn't exist, and I really so enjoy painting for you. Anyway, let's get on with this big reveal. Carefully remove the sticky back plastic and then the masking tape to reveal the finished painting. My version of the Bob Ross classic, Balmy Beach, and I hope it's going to be your next seascape too. So there you have it. Another lovely classic Bob Ross painting with a little extra twist from yours truly. I even wore a shirt that matches the palm trees. But don't move, there's another splashing painting coming right along. Splashing painting. They don't get any better, these jokes, I'm afraid.